Order. Welcome to today's session of the Business and Trade Committee as we wrap up our inquiry into small business. Thank you very much indeed to our witnesses for joining us. We have this session ahead of our session with ministers because of the committee's real concern about the organised crime wave which is taking hold of our streets. So, Sal, perhaps you could kick off for us. We have heard the most appalling evidence from around the country, and we can see it in our own constituencies. What it looks like to us is that there is an organised crime wave that is taking hold of the British High Street. Can you just give us a sense from the National Crime Agency about what on earth is going on?
Yeah, sure. So I think the challenge is best sort of viewed as sort of described as a pyramid. So at the bottom of the pyramid, what we're seeing are thousands of shops engaged in, kind of so-called lower level criminality.
Thousands?
That's right.
Thousands of shops engaged in low level criminal activity?
That's correct. So this is most visible in terms of the sale of small scale illicit vapes, illicit tobacco. We're also seeing that linked to illegal working and illegal renting. So, for example, renting, kind of mattresses at the back of shops. And that type of thing, and also small-scale money laundering that comes along with it. And that's not to minimise it, but it's just in terms of kind of criminality, relatively speaking, the volumes are small.
For the benefit of our education, what is small-scale when it comes to money laundering?
Yeah, so this would be, you've got to put it in the context of over 100 billion is laundered through in or through the UK. So with a UK footprint each year, and that's the National Crime Agency's estimate. So a lot of these shops will be doing, kind of in the sort of low thousands of pounds in a month, for example, which might seem like a lot, to the average person.
It's like an extraordinary amount.
But in the context of, kind of money laundering extent, it's relatively small. The aggregated effect, however, of thousands of shops is what's quite pernicious and quite challenging, because if there were 100 shops trading in relatively low volumes, then that's something you can get your teeth stuck into. But because there are thousands up and down the country, the aggregated effect is huge. And then I guess the last thing to say in terms of the serious organised crime element of it, so at the top of the pyramid, we're seeing hundreds of shops rather than thousands of shops, where the level of criminality is you would describe as kind of organised. So that might be selling thousands of fraudulent goods, it may be involved in the distribution of drugs, and it may be involved in laundering millions of pounds. But that's a much smaller number. When we talk about it in terms of organised crime, what we're not seeing at the bottom of the pyramid is the shopkeeper, for example, feeling like or knowing that they are part of a broader organised crime ecosystem. But of course, if you are selling illicit vapes or illicit tobacco, they haven't necessarily been smuggled into the country by the person working into the shop, and it's part of a broader criminal supply chain to get those goods into the country.
So I am enormously in debt to West Midlands Police, and in particular Sergeant Neil Marsh in my constituency, for taking me through the kind of realities they see in Birmingham East. What has been described to me is that you've now basically got general crime stores on the high street, which are basically running money laundering, selling contraband goods. They may be fronts for human trafficking, they may be fronts for prostitution, but actually they're part of networks that may be in competition with other networks, but there may be, in fact, just a small number of organised crime groups which are using these networks to launder money that then goes back to Iraq or Afghanistan or elsewhere. Is that a picture that you recognise?
Yeah, so there's certainly some of that, and it is recognised. It's recognised as a smaller proportion of the overall challenge that we're facing, but it certainly does exist, and it certainly is something that we're seeing.
And have you got a sense at the National Crime Agency about the total amount of money that is being laundered through what you've just told the committee is a network of thousands of stores?
Yeah, so unfortunately that's work in progress at the moment. So if we think about the sort of Operation Machinised life cycle, we began this from the National Crime Agency perspective in March this year, and then ran our largest intensification with over 2,700 shops either visited or raided a couple of months in October. So we are now going through a period of sort of taking all of that information, consolidating it, and trying to understand, kind of get our heads around what that tells us about scale. So we'll be producing some assessment and a view in terms of scale, in terms of numbers of shops and volumes of cash being put through it. I just unfortunately don't have that figure with me today.
So what's your gut feel? If there's 100 billion that's being laundered in the UK, which is a large number, have you got a sense of what kind of fraction of the 100 billion is going through these networks?
I think that probably the best thing to say is, at the moment, our assessment, like I said, there are thousands of these shops up and down the country. The model is polycriminal, as you suggest. So they're conducting a whole host of different types of crime using either networks of shops or individual shops. And because there are thousands of them, we can sort of safely assess that it will be a large figure. But I wouldn't want to give the committee a figure prematurely today.
In the billions?
It will certainly be counted in millions and a high proportion of millions, but I wouldn't. Yeah, like I said, I don't want to give a figure today.
So as we sit here today, we know there's thousands of people involved, but we've got absolutely no idea how much money is going through them.
We will, but like I said,
But not today.
But not today. Yeah. So we concluded the intensification recently, so we just need to kind of do that work to be able to come up with a figure that we know can stand up to scrutiny.
And how long has this problem been evolving, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say because obviously when you look at a problem, you tend to find more of it. And obviously what we've done at the National Crime Agency and with our partners in policing and trading standards and immigration enforcement and so on, and HMRC, obviously we've put this problem, we've shone a spotlight on it over the last several months. So we are finding more because we're looking at it. So our sense is this is a problem that has been growing over the years, but once again we're becoming more and more aware of the scale of it as we do more activity, more work, more operational effect. So we're becoming more aware of the problem than we ever have been previously.
Okay, and what is it getting worse? Is it getting better? Is it static?
So we're seeing more, but like I said, it's difficult to say whether or not that's actually because it's getting worse or we're just exploring it. We are confident that the work through Operation Mechanise is having a positive effect in terms of deterrent and driving some of these people away from the high street. But it's too early to tell whether or not what type of impact we've had. Like I said, we only recently concluded the operation, or at least a phase of the operation, at the end of October. So we'll just need a bit of time to understand the impact.
Wendy Martin, what do your colleagues tell you about the evolution of this problem and how big it is and the kind of different lines of criminal business that are running through these general crime stores?
Yes, I don't have actual data because this is a mixture of 170 odd local authorities in England and Wales. Anecdotally, and from people that have fed back to us from their support for Op Mechanise and other things, the view is yes, it is growing. The anecdotes are it's a mix of lots more online shopping these days and over the last trajectory for products, a lot of products, plus the impact of cost of living means that what's happening is landlords, even the suggestion is legitimate landlords or even semi-legitimate landlords, if you can call it that way, need income themselves, so they may ask less questions.
I don't actually know what a semi-legitimate landlord is. I think it's like being pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not.
Well, yeah, okay. So there's some people that don't care. I guess that it's the spectrum. There are people that have never cared about who they may rent shops to and what they're doing. There are other people who perhaps care less than they might have done. The whole high street market has changed. Yeah. And what's being seen on the high street is almost all of the new premises that are going into vacant shops are seeing through Op Mechanise takeaways, mini markets, these, I'd said, polycriminal stores that sell all sorts of things. There's been a huge focus on tobacco and vapes, understandably, but there's also things like illegal foodstuffs and cheap, unsafe products,
gas,
counterfeit, everything. Yeah. And I know in a recent survey that was done by the Chartered Trading Standards Institute, this sort of worry around organised crime and the illicit high street, if you like, was the major concern for trading standards professionals.
You've been working in this field for a long time. I mean, when did you first really get a sense that organised crime was taking a grip of the high street?
I don't have specific information on that. It has
But
definitely.
what's your own sense as a professional? When did you start worrying about it for the first time?
I guess as a professional, you've always worried about it, but it's become significantly more of a worry, I would suggest, in the last 5 years. And particularly as more funding's been, it's as Sal said, the more funding that's provided to look at a problem, the more problems you find.
Yeah.
So councils have focused a lot more on the illicit tobacco and illicit vapes.
Yeah.
More resources has been provided, and it's a big priority for most local authorities because of child and health protection.
Yeah.
The more you look, the more you find.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Matt Weston.
Just on that, you said 5 years, Wendy. I think many of us, I'm sure, have been sort of sensing this has been going on for quite a long time. There's been a lot in the media about this particular topic, which I think has raised public profile and concern for it. But Sal, when you were talking, when did it really hit your radar, and when did you, Mackinac, you said, happened in the spring of this year. What action was taking place before then?
From a National Crime Agency perspective, it's not, so this is not our traditional area of focus. It was really...
Is it?
Yeah, so this is a sort of hyper-local problem in terms of the impact that it has, because it's affecting a local high street, it's affecting a community. Obviously, at the National Crime Agency, we're a national organisation with a limited local footprint. Obviously, what we do is we work with our partners in policing and trading standards and HMRC and agencies with a local footprint. And this was a case of effectively those are partner organisations with local footprints talking to us and saying, okay, we feel like this is a big problem. And then obviously doing some of our own kind of national research, so using things like financial intelligence, national financial intelligence, to start kind of pulling at that thread and seeing the potential scale of this issue.
You know, I think it was quite evident that this was international crime gangs several years ago, and was there just no interest or no priority for this?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say there was no interest. I think this is one of those ones where it probably has existed for a while, but these are, complex investigations when thinking about the transnational element of it, and also understanding that as part of the broader problem, that is a small fraction in terms of what it is that we're seeing, and the overwhelming majority of the issue here that we're seeing is not what we would consider, kind of high-level serious and organised crime threats. It's the aggregation, as I said, when you add all of these, kind of so-called kind of lower-level criminality, when you add it all up, then that was the problem that actually hit the National Crime Agency's radar, and why we decided to set up the Mackinac partnership alongside our partners here today, but also policing, HMRC.
That decision was taken when? When did the Mackinac partnership get established?
That it got established in March this year.
Quite staggering, really. Wendy, I remember witnessing a young woman being coerced into a nail bar several years ago in one of my towns, which I was really worried by. You look at any high street, certainly the streets in my towns, and you'll see nail bars on nearly every corner. You'll see Turkish barbers on every street. Surely when we had cases such as those Vietnamese who sadly lost their lives in the back of a trailer, which I don't know how many years ago that was, we must have realised something was going on, Sal.
Yeah, so in terms of modern slavery and human trafficking, so that's been a core priority threat for the National Crime Agency for the last 10 years, and obviously with our partners in policing. And certainly at that level of the threat, that has had an enduring kind of operational and investigative response. I think, I'd want to urge the committee away from, all shops, such as nail bars and things like that, have a criminal footprint. That's certainly not what we're seeing, and our assessment is that the overwhelming majority of shops on the high street remain not to be suspicious or criminal. However, there are so many shops on our high street, and it only takes a very small fraction of those to be linked to either suspicious activity or criminal behaviour for there to be thousands of shops that, need to be looked at from both an enforcement point of view and broader. So I certainly don't want to give the committee the impression that every kind of nail bar in the UK has got a criminal footprint attached to it. That's certainly not what we're seeing. And when we are seeing serious transnational threats, the National Crime Agency and our partners in policing are looking at those.
Understand that, but I think if you speak to the hairdressing federation, or whatever they're called, or the beauty groups, national associations, they say it's pretty obvious what has been going on for quite some time. Wendy, how do you think the agencies are working well, and where particularly have you got evidence of them working well locally?
I think we found the partnership working is really crucial, because from a trading standards perspective, we're almost in quite a support role with this, because some of the higher level things around labour abuse and exploitation, modern slavery, clearly we report in, we share intelligence if we find it, but it's not something for us to take forward. I think it does vary local area to local area, because it does depend on the resources available to trading standards and the local police. A lot of the time trading standards cannot act without police support in certain of these areas because of the risks associated, both to officers going in but also to the people inside the premises.
Has that been a challenge over recent years?
It has been a challenge in pockets, not everywhere, but in particular areas you will have places where, and it's not just the high street, to be honest, that's something trading standards experienced before. There are certain sites you wouldn't go on because there's known to be weapons or whatever.
And in your estimation, how many more trading standards staff do you think you need compared to what we have currently? I mean, as a percentage.
Trading standards lost about 40% in the lot of people since about 2011, 2012. I think that data is out there. So if you wanted to
40%.
40%, yeah. So if you wanted to reinstate the service to where it was in 2010, that's what you're talking about. Current budgets across England and Wales, the totality for trading standards, I think it's about 100, no, sorry, is it right? My head, I've just looked at the data. About 120 million is the total amount. There's about 2,200 full-time equivalent trading standards staff across England and Wales. They're quite small services, but actually investing in trading standards itself, whilst very welcome and would obviously assist, will only assist in tackling this kind of problem if it's mirrored with resources available from police, HMRC, Labour Abuse Authority, immigration, because it's that partnership that enables you to tackle these sort of supply chains, as it were, because it's not just what's going on in the shop itself, it's how the workers and the product is getting in and how the money's getting out.
You'd argue that actually the investment in resources in these teams more than pays for itself against the revenue we're losing against these illegal sales.
Intuitively, I would say yes, but I have to say to the committee, I don't have data. I'm sure HMRC would be able to provide that kind of data around legitimate tobacco revenue, what is lost and what isn't lost.
Thanks. Just your take on this scale question. So Sal's just told the committee that there are thousands of these organisations. There's 7,000 high streets in Britain, so that is potentially one of these general crime stores on every high street. What's your sense of the scale? Do you have a kind of a different take on how big this problem is?
I don't have a different take, no. I think NCA are better placed because they've also got all the data coming up from what trading standards found in Organised. So
that's in Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. Just for the record and just to get us all to the same place in terms of understanding and knowledge, both Wendy and Sal, you've been talking about what takes place on the high streets. Can you just give me a sense from someone who isn't familiar with this world, what is I suppose the business model as you see it on the high street, and then what's the underpinning criminality? Are there things that we should be looking out for? Could you just, I suppose, educate me just to the basic level to start with? That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Are you happy if I start on the basic high street and then you can pick up further up the chain with that? Sure. So, I mean, if we're talking about a convenience store that has been found to be, it might be selling illicit tobacco, it might be selling illicit vapes, it may be selling I'm sure colleagues on the committee have seen things like the American candy stores, which is a lot of illegal food additive. There's all sorts of cheap electrical goods that might be unsafe, all of that kind of stuff. But the big focus has been tobacco and vapes. So officers will go in, and it is changing, and this is something we have seen over the last 12 months, is before you would go in and there would be a shop full or half a shop full of tobacco and vapes where literally the officers would pull it off the shelves into the crate, seize it, take it away. Then there were more and more and more sophisticated hides, so things that looked like dumbwaiters hidden in the back of walls and stuff going down in cellars, which is why we use sniffer dogs a lot. What colleagues are seeing now is smaller and smaller quantities on the shelves in the shop, because you risk losing less if you've only got a couple of bagfuls in your shop as opposed to a whole shop full. And then the information that's been suggested is the shopkeeper will then phone someone who will turn up on a moped or with something that's called a stash vehicle, which HMRC are very familiar with. There's van loads of these things, they're parked somewhere. And when a shop has been cleared, a new set of supply comes in. And that's tobacco and vapes in particular, maybe less so with other products. So that's what's being seen. So it can feel a little bit like you see as you go back, you see as you go back. It is important because it does disrupt and it takes money out, but it's then that supply chain.
We're going to get into how you close these things for
Yeah.
good rather than just for 15 minutes before they reopen again. But yeah.
So yes, and then it's what happens because trading standards, where these are individuals, that's very much then a police role in terms of that supply chain and further up.
But you're also seeing nitrous oxide. You're seeing money laundering, as
Yes.
we've discussed. We're seeing use of ATMs, I think, to launder money as well, I'm told.
I'm not directly aware of that side of it, but I
Okay.
would not be at all surprised.
Sal, do you want to round out the picture?
Yeah, so I can't comment about the ATMs. It's not something that I'm personally aware of. The other thing that we're seeing, certainly at that level, in terms of the volume level, is also immigration offending as well. So people working in these shops with improper paperwork to do so, and that's why immigration enforcement have been such a key partner throughout Mackinac. And then at the top of the chain, in terms of much smaller proportion, it's similar offences but at larger scale. So instead of seeing sort of tens of thousands of pounds being laundered, it's, our inference is it's more in the, kind of hundreds of thousands and in fact millions in some cases as well. And tax evasion is obviously another.
I was going to say, I'm going to hazard a guess they're not fully paying their taxes.
No, so certainly not. So in terms of volume, if you think about it as a sort of polycriminal model, every offence is happening at a small scale, but because no one offence is essentially kind of showing itself out as requiring a really robust enforcement response, every offence is at a low enough scale to not, either lead to a criminal justice outcome or a heavy fine or something along those lines. Yep. So in those cases, it's a lot of small-scale money laundering and tax evasion.
Entirely cash-only operations?
No, not. So we call them cash-intensive businesses. It's a bit of a misnomer. So a lot of them do accept either credit card or bank transfer.
Okay, thank you. And Aldridge?
Thank you. I'm very aware in my high street in Western-super-Mare and Wirral of the impact of cuts to public services in these areas. I think one of the things I see all the time is a kind of whack-a-mole. So whenever the new priority comes in, and then something else will grow. With these, we talk about these local kind of enforcement multi-agency initiatives. Are they fit for purpose? And especially Wendy, are you seeing any local authorities that are doing this well?
Yes, I mean, there definitely is, and you are right with, like most public services, as you've said, the priorities will change over a period of time. I think at the moment there are very few local authorities, from what we see in our intelligence assessments, that don't have illicit tobacco and vapes pretty high up on their priority agenda. And it is pockets, so even in big rural areas, you have certain town centres that may be particularly affected by this in what you would otherwise think of, maybe you might think of this being an urban authority or a London problem or a city centre problem. And I think one of the concerns has been the police are very supportive when, especially in these intensification programmes like Op Mackinac, but it tends to be the neighbourhood policing colleagues that do it because they're on the high street and they're very supportive and they're very helpful, but then they will also get moved on to other priorities, the same as local authorities. So it's the question, intensification programmes do work very, very well, and NCA have done a really good job in leading Op Mackinac, but it's a different question if you want ongoing focus on this all the time.
It's nobody's day job, basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Sonny Kumar.
Thank you, Chair. So coming back to you, Sal, you said there's thousands of businesses up and down the country that are trading illegally. Where's this in your priority list? So if I was to do a pie chart, where would high street crime be at in that pie chart?
Yeah, so from an NCA perspective, cash-based money laundering is a really high priority for us, and that sits on our strategic action plan. It is something that we've been looking at for a long period of time. The National Crime Agency is a relatively small organisation, like I said, with no local footprints. There's about 5,600, 5,700 of us. So we work with this coalition of organisations to deliver effect locally. Obviously, what I can't say is speak on behalf of, we worked with over 50 organisations for Operation Mechanise, so I can't speak on behalf of where it sits in their priorities.
Where was it, in terms of your priorities, where would that be?
Yeah, so it's sat within our cash-based money laundering priority, which is one of our. We have a small number of illicit finance or economic crime priority threats, and it's one of them. So it's high. I'd describe it as a high priority for us, but we don't.
How many other high priorities have you got, Sal?
In the National Crime Agency, well, we work across all serious organised crime threats as well. So organised.
We're trying to work out whether this is like one of 100 high priorities you've got, or is it like one of 3?
Yeah. So in economic crime, it's so illicit finance. It's one of 3. So we prioritise high-end money laundering, cash-based money laundering, and technological enablers.
Okay, so it's a top 3 priority for one of your divisions.
Correct, yeah. So, and that is for the money laundering aspect of it as well. So what we don't do, and this is why we work with trading standards and other partners, obviously we have, the National Crime Agency has no role in terms of, contraband goods on the high street, so we work through the partnership to deliver effect in that way. In terms of the other organisations, all I can say is from our perspective is all of the partners of Mechanise have been fully committed and really tenacious in their approach. And when we set it up, it wasn't, a case of we didn't have to convince anybody to join the partnership. So from our perspective, we would, our partners have prioritised it, but I can't answer where it sits in the pantheon of their priorities.
Who leads on this? Because so many constituents of mine say to me, crime's a big problem on the high street, and they won't say, they're not sure who that person there is that you should be reporting this to. Who is that, the main body that should be reporting? And I know this is multi-agency, and I know there's multiple people that need to come into it, but who is the person overlooking this? And then from the second point on that, how do you go about enforcing it, and how do you go about with enforcing several times? Because having a raid once in a blue moon is not going to be as successful if there's regular intelligence there than someone looking after it and then going in again and again.
Yeah, so I mean, just to answer in reverse order, we've over 2,700 strikes in this phase of the operation, over 920 people arrested, over £10 million seized. This will have an impact. So, we obviously want to demonstrate to the public that these are not small figures, and a lot of people are now in either the criminal justice process or immigration enforcement process as a result, and we've taken a lot of criminal value off the streets. I think it's £4.5 million illicit cigarettes, hundreds of thousands of vapes taken. So it has an impact, and is one of the largest concentrated law enforcement operations of this kind ever. So so it will have an impact in terms of where do people go. So if they suspect crime on their high street, it's their local police force. It's not the National Crime Agency. But what we set Operation Mechanise up to do was to provide that, effectively a sort of, we have a joint coordination cell for this work to really provide some sort of central kind of top-down national impetus and momentum to get the whole system around the country, from national, regional, local, to start looking at this issue. So yeah, if your constituent suspects criminality on the high street, it's, Operation Mechanise is not a reporting body, it's not an entity, it's something that we stand up within the organisation and build a partnership around, so it's still the local police.
When we heard from the City of London police, who are taking a lead on this across the constabularies of our country, they said that this issue barely scrapes into the top 10 of their priorities for most police forces. I mean, that must be a real problem for you if you're trying to mobilise some people on the ground to actually take this problem apart.
So yeah, I mean, look, the police have, like on all law enforcement agencies, grappling with multiple priorities, and they certainly have those with, violence against women and girls agendas, various other things. So I don't want to, we've got 43 forces that all have individual chiefs and PCCs and, set a range of priorities. All I can say really is, as I stated before to the committee, which is we've not found it difficult at getting people to sign up to this partnership. And every police force, well, almost every police force in the country had a physical presence on the high street throughout this period.
Who's in charge then of pulling these operations together? I mean, who sort of takes the initiative in saying, right, I know what we're going to do this week. We're going to close down all of these thousands of stores that are money laundering and ruining the high street.
Yeah.
Who presses the button? Go.
So for Mechanise, for phases 1 and 2 of Mechanise, and like I said, Mechanise is an ongoing endeavour, so it's not that we've done it and it's ended, it's still continuing. But for the first 2 phases, they were led out of the National Economic Crime Centre in the National Crime Agency, but with National Police Chiefs Council as our principal partner, and effectively we run it with them as a sort of joint operation. So we make that decision together.
So say I am a PCSO in Ward End, and I see all kinds of bad behaviour going on the high street, and I think, hang on a minute, it's time we did something about this. What do I do as a new PCSO who wants to get a grip?
Yeah, so my advice to that PCSO would be don't wait for the NCA to give you a tap on the shoulder, and actually this is, if you're in a community team, this is part of community policing. What we can do through Mechanise is provide that enhanced coordination. So, for example, this time we ran a joint operational cell, so all of the agencies came together, they could share intelligence, they could deconflict.
But hang on a sec, so if I go along to my daily operational meeting and talk to my sergeant about what a great idea I've had to close down illegal businesses on Washwood Heath Road, I mean, presumably I'm going to run into an immediate problem, which is the sergeant saying, well, actually, our 3 priorities for this week are A, B and C.
Yeah, I can't speak on behalf of neighbourhood policing teams, but obviously I know they take the concerns of their neighbourhoods really seriously, and if it's something that the community are asking for, then they would find a way to look into it. But through the Mechanise construct, we've, like I said, been able to provide some catalyst and some momentum with that national coordination, the sharing of intelligence, the connecting of agencies, because the alchemy with it has been, it's not a neighbourhood team working in isolation, it's also trading standards.
Yeah. What you're describing is actually quite a big operation that involves at least 2 or 3 different agencies.
So nationally or at a community level?
Well, at a community level, if I'm a humble PCSO trying to get a grip of Washwood Heath High Street, I mean, how am I going to pull together HMRC, border agency, trading standards, and whoever else I need to get involved?
So those, those contacts are there in place, and there's a lot of, be that through, kind of joint shared services, for example. Some councils will have these constructs in place already. They'll have multi-agency.
Some or all?
I'd be confident in saying all of them have a version of a multi-agency forum where they can catalyse this type of activity. Obviously, that may look different with regional and local variances, but I'd be confident in saying they all have a multi-agency forum.
Thank you. So, did you say to Sonia how many illicit cigarettes were seized?
Yeah, I think it was 4. I think it was 4.5 million.
4.5 million.
Let me
so
just double check.
About 4.5 million,
yes,
roughly. So in 2024, 13 billion cigarettes were sold in the UK, according to HMRC, and the HMRC thinks that 10% of cigarettes sold in the UK are illicit cigarettes. They say that, though, having had a 44% decline in the number of duty-paid cigarettes sold between 21 and 2024. So whether 10% is the real number or not. In reality, you haven't seized that many in comparison to the amount of illicit cigarettes on the market, have you?
No, as a fraction. So yeah, so we've been clear from the beginning, and in terms of the results of Operation Mechanise, this is not a problem that we're going to solve overnight.
No, but 4.1 million as opposed to 1.3 billion isn't we're not going to solve it overnight. It's we haven't really got a grip on it, is it not?
Yeah, so once again, I can't, in terms of illicit tobacco, the lead agency for that's HMRC. I know it's something that they prioritise and take seriously and are working on, but I wouldn't want to speak on their behalf in terms of...
So going to move on to how we solve this problem with Mr. Madders.
Okay. Sounds like I've got the solutions. So I attended some raids with the local police and other agencies over the summer, and yeah, lots of illegal stuff was obtained, closure orders sought. Those shops are now open. Makes a bit of a mockery of it all, doesn't it? What do we need to do to deal with this on a permanent basis?
You want me to pick up? I've got, if it's okay with the committee, I'll pick up. So we have some suggestions around closure orders that have come. So there's a number of different elements to this. The first one is in the areas that are two-tier local governments where you've got counties and districts. Trading standards sits at county council level, but county councils cannot apply for closure orders directly. This has always been an issue, so they have to go through the police or district councils. For something like Macanised, not a problem, but if you're trying to do routine closure orders, so we would very much like to see those powers be given to county councils. There's also problems over time limits. Both they have to be within into court, as I understand, between 24 and 48 hours from you going into the shop. So a colleague in Swansea gave us an example. They did a lot of raids on a Friday evening in a high street in Swansea because they knew the shops only opened on a Friday evening and only sold to people they knew. So they went in with police and other partners on a Friday evening and then they phoned the magistrates court out of hours service to try and get 9 closure orders on a Sunday. Was not ideal and caused problems for the courts. So there's something about a longer period of time to seek the court approval. And also initial closure orders, I believe, are only for 3 months. So as you've said, they reopen. We would like an extension of the time, and there could be thresholds for that to ensure it's not misused, if it's a repeat offence or something. But the big question that came up and we're starting to see more of is when the officers go in, they are not at all confident in some shops that the person on site really is anything other than potentially an exploited person in their own right. They're saying they own the shop, there's no confidence they do. So one of the suggestions has been there ought to be provision to have a closure order that is indefinite until the owner of the business, so a company director, and I don't know if Martin would have any comments on that, or a business owner,
That's Martin, don't worry.
comes and proves to the court or the local authority, however it's set up, that they are the business owner and it has to stay shut. So they were our suggestions.
Please proceed, Mr.
By
Mayor.
amazing coincidence, Wendy, whilst you were speaking, I've just had an email from my local authority about one of these shops where they opened up next door.
Yes, and that's the...
And they've now got a closure order against next door. So the common denominator here, I would suggest, is actually the owner of the property.
Yeah.
Do we need to be tougher on the landlords?
That was the other point. I think there's two approaches. One is the premises and one is the person, and whether you can take some sort of something like a criminal behaviour order or something similar to that against the individual, linked to this requirement of proof of that you really are the owner of the business. And yes, I think there is a question about landlords. I don't have the knowledge, I have to say, to show how one would do that, but
I think you were suggesting earlier on that some landlords are not so concerned
Yes.
about who's renting as
Due
long as they
diligence,
get the money. I think that there's definitely something in us
We would agree with
making them do a little bit more due diligence before they rent these
Absolutely.
properties out. Can I just go on to another element of enforcement, particularly you, Martin? Companies House have given evidence to this committee that they were going to increase the number of prosecutions. I think it was about 8 months ago. So how many more prosecutions in that time have been commenced?
We've been growing our number of prosecutions, not to a high level, because what we've found is the behaviour on the register has predominantly been around address hijack and identity hijack. And in the majority of cases, that's from people outside the UK. So this is organised criminality from overseas, creating hundreds, if not thousands, of shell companies or mini umbrella companies. Prosecution and indeed financial penalties is not going to be the appropriate sanction there because they're outside the country. And what we've aimed to do and done quickly is to shut those companies down and take them off the register. And I'd probably offer that comment in a sense of this conversation because we were really pleased to support both mechanised operations. I mean, we've got different powers now to use our data, our back office data in particular. We're able to identify networks of companies that perhaps our partners can't see because we're able to track those on the register. So we've been feeding intelligence into the NCA. We've actually got an officer who's embedded in the NCA. So
Just before Mr. Madders proceeds, I just want to absolutely clarify this. So we've got foreign nationals based overseas setting up shell companies in Britain, which are then running companies in properties where we can't find the landlord, and they're operating a general crime emporia where we struggle to shut them down, and even when we do, they just reopen again.
essentially, and I guess
we're stunned for silence on this committee, but that is definitely a stunning conclusion. Sorry, do proceed, Mr. Madders.
There are a number of other actors in this, aren't there? There's the people who you actually catch red-handed, for want of a better description. You can obviously disqualify them if they're director, you can fine them, you can imprison them. Do we know how many fines have been issued, how many people have been imprisoned for the whole range of potential offences you might come across as part of one of these investigations? Does anyone know?
So I know in terms of, so from the second phase of the operation, 716 civil penalty referral notices, so fines up to £60,000 have been issued. Obviously, it will take time to understand how many of those get, either get paid and how many of those arrests turn into charges and prosecutions. So it's just too early to say.
Okay. I've done some questioning around illegal car washes. The Home Office don't seem to know how many of those fines have been paid, or indeed they can't tell us much about enforcement. Are you confident that if you actually do issue fines, that you're going to find someone who's actually going to pay them?
Well, no. I mean, you never are in terms of whether or not they have the financial means to pay them. Obviously, those that do pay them, from an intelligence point of view, are interesting because if the fines are £50,000-60,000 and somebody's paying those fines for, for example, for illegal working, then that could be a red flag and actually lead to further intelligence development and investigation. But simply there's no way of saying that when any fines or confiscation or anything like that goes through the British system, you need the means to be able to pay them to realise that value, and so you can't say with 100% certainty that you'll get that money.
So do we need another tool for enforcement other than fines?
Yeah, so I mean, like what I'd really stress to the committee is that enforcement has to be seen as just one component of a broader issue. It's we certainly can't enforce our way out of this issue in terms of the scale. Like I've already said, thousands of these shops, some low level, some very complicated. It needs to be part of, it needs to be seen as a subset to, kind of broader kind of, be that economic rejuvenation or other types of policy work. I think from an enforcement point of view, there are powers, so enhanced non-conviction based powers, for example, for law enforcement could be beneficial and could be used as a deterrent. So we've spoken about closure orders. They're quite difficult to obtain. The police don't have that many powers. They can go on the Licensing Act, various other powers to get a shop closed. Actually, if we made it easier for the police to close suspicious businesses and to shift the burden of proof onto the business owner, because if you're a legitimate business owner, it should be easy to prove that you're a legitimate business owner, then actually that would help. We spoke about competing priorities earlier, but shifting the burden of proof onto the business owner would help, stretch investigative resources, and also ensuring, and Mr. Byrne, going back to your example of the PCSO in your community, ensuring those individuals have access to things like financial investigators is really important, because they can deal with the thing that's in front of them, but actually the investigation in the background takes time and it's granular.
Yeah.
Anything further? I mean, how effective is the threat of imprisonment as an enforcement tool?
I mean, as far as that's it, I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder, but obviously we would say that the threat of imprisonment is a credible deterrent. However, we know that at the levels that are being, transacted, and that can be proved in terms of criminal benefit, obviously if you're able to prove somebody laundered, a small sum of money, then it would be very unusual to get a custodial sentence for that.
Okay. Just one further question before we run out of time. So what is put to me in Birmingham is that even when you get directors struck off at Companies House, basically a new company is very quickly set back up with a cousin or a relative who is then the director for the company that then either reopens in the same premises or indeed in, as Mr. Madders has described, the shop next door. I mean, Mr. Swain, how do we equip you with more power or resource to fix that problem?
Yeah. So I think one of the key measures that's come in last week is ID verification.
Yeah.
So we now are requiring any new company to go through verification. Everybody on the register in the next 12 months will have to verify their identity. It's interesting, even in the week since we launched it, you're seeing a different trend in incorporation. I mentioned the overseas issue. We're seeing a decrease, for example, in the last week. I'm not to say that's going to be sustained, but we might see it in the longer term. I think that's where our own intelligence capability comes in, the ability to link either addresses or what is non-public data like payment details. So sometimes people aren't really that clever and they use the same payment card. So a disqualified director will use a payment card to appoint a family member. We're able to see that. We know it's the payment card, the IP address of a disqualified director. We can take action.
What is the action you can take?
So we can expedite strike off of that company within 28 days.
Okay, on what grounds?
On the grounds they've made a false statement on incorporation.
Because the person of significant control is actually not...
Any false statement on incorporation, this is the beauty of the law change for us. In the past, it took us 3 months to take a company down a strike-off path. If they make a false statement on incorporation and we can prove it, we can strike that company off within 28 days.
Okay.
It's a very swift power.
So Wendy, from your experience, is there any further power or resourcing that you think is needed in Companies House to try and take out the dynamics of this problem?
I think, as Martin said, the ID is perceived to be a really important one. The other concern, but I have to say I don't know whether this changes in the change regulation, but was the ability for company directors to backdate resignations.
Yeah.
So they could backdate their resignation from a company board to prior to when offending took place. And that was, to be fair, that wasn't in relation to illicit high streets. This was a problem in relation to doorstep crime, but I'm sure it's across the piece. So that was a concern, but I don't know if that's been addressed.
Al, any other powers gaps or resourcing gaps in Companies House that you want to bring to our attention, based on your experience of alt mechanised?
Yeah, so I'd say Companies House, like local authorities, it can be a really strong preventative tool. No gaps, but obviously we've got a Companies House member embedded in the department, and by able to work through them, it's not just that we can get somebody struck off and sort of follow that trail. We can also then work with, for example, our partners in the banking sector to make sure we deny them access to legitimate financial system, and then that is a chain of disruption that's very effective. So I wouldn't ask for more powers, but I would just say thank you for their continued support.
Okay, and so Mr. Swain, based on the new powers and resources and the new legislation that you've got now coming into place, can you foresee at this stage any gaps in powers or resources when it comes to solving this problem of shutting down illegal businesses on the high street?
I suppose the only change in the law that I would look for is that if it's not on incorporation, so if you've got an existing company that we know we have evidence that they're engaged in some kind of criminality, that goes against the spirit of the new legislation. To be able to strike that company off, an existing company off, as quickly as we could a newly formed company, rather than taking 3 months. Because my worry is whenever we leave a company, they are still engaging in that criminality. I suppose the only point I would make to the committee in this regard is a lot of the businesses that we're dealing with aren't companies, so they're just sole trader pop-up businesses. What we're interested is there a company behind it? Yeah. And that's where we work with partners to gain the intelligence into us to say there's a street of shops, 4 of these are linked to a company, because we can then do that added linking. That company is actually linked, and this is what we did in Mechanized, to a number of other companies that are linked to other businesses. So we're able to feed that in.
Right, that's been incredibly helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed for your evidence, and thank you very much indeed for what you are doing. We are incredibly grateful for your evidence and indeed for your work. That concludes this panel. Order, order. Order, order. Welcome to this second panel in today's hearings as we wrap up the Business and Trade Committee inquiry into small business. Minister, grateful for your time this afternoon, and you've brought some officials with you. Thank you for that. So, Minister, the evidence that we've received in this inquiry is pretty stark. We have government procurement spend, about 20% of the 341 billion that the state spends goes to small business. If the target was 33%, as it was back in 2010, that'd be an extra £44 billion going into the cash flow of small business. We've got late payment to SMEs calculated at about £23 billion a year. We've got a tax compliance bill estimated by the FSB at £25 billion a year. We've got national insurance costs just for the hospitality sector alone that have just gone up by £3.5 billion a year. We've got energy costs which have doubled in the last 3 to 4 years. We have crime costs, which just cost the retail sector £2 billion a year. We have business rate reform that has been widely criticised for not being radical enough. We've got a VAT regime which allows undercutting of legitimate businesses on the high street. We have got organised crime taking hold of our high streets in a way that I don't think anybody has really kind of understood, with evidence that we've received today that it is nobody's day job to fix it, even though it is potentially thousands of businesses on the high street. We've got businesses telling us they can't get hold of the skills that they need, and we have a business growth service run by the department that is now a website. Tell us how anyone is still in business in this country, and what you are now going to do as a new minister to try and turn this parlour situation around.
Well, thank you for that introduction. I mean, for me, this is in many ways a dream job. I ran my own business for nearly a decade, and there's an element of catharsis to working through so many of the challenges, including the ones that you have just expressed. I think the thing to say is, in addition to all the challenges you have just outlined, we have in the stock of going on 6 million small businesses in this country, with businesses that have been through an extraordinary amount over recent years, whether that's from the financial crisis, austerity and stalled living standards, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine.
We've got a great analysis of the problems.
Yeah.
So what we just want to zero in on, just
but I was saying,
is your priorities for fixing it.
I was saying that as a sort of introduction to say we also, as a result of that, have a stock of businesses that are extraordinarily resilient and adaptable because they have been through so much. And what we have now is an opportunity to systematically work through all of those barriers that they are facing.
So what are you going to get done in the next 12 months?
Well, we've started with the small business strategy and on the implementation of that. We've just finished our consultation on late payments, which you raise, which is an extraordinary cost on business, not just in terms of the money that it takes out of businesses, but in terms of the time that it takes. We are working to make sure that there is more money put into businesses through procurement, as you say, but also through things like the British Business Bank.
Are you going to stick to the 20% target, or can that go up?
Well, the thing about the 20% target, as you say, is this is on procurement. Sorry, Chair. Yeah, we inherited that 33% target that not only, as you say, wasn't met and was down at 20%, but was actually going backwards. We were actually spending less on SMEs than we were 5 years before. So it's about trying to make a step change in the culture within government, but also the ability of SMEs to take advantage of what for them is a £400 billion opportunity. So we're doing an extraordinary amount to try to progress that. And we're cutting red tape. I know all governments promise that they're going to cut the regulatory admin burden. But I think you've already seen in the last few weeks from this government about £250 million being taken away from the regulatory burden, particularly on small businesses with the changes to corporate reporting. So we're working at pace to make sure we are actually delivering
those
on
are
this
the
cross-government
top three:
strategy.
late payments, procurement and red tape. Those are the three priorities at the top of your list?
I think that would be the ones that I would be most excited for, but also feel with a sense of urgency around.
Matters.
Afternoon. How would you say the Procurement Act is going to support SMEs?
I think the Procurement Act seeks to deal with that historic failure to open up procurement to SMEs. I think it does many important things like removing some of those particularly egregious barriers, things like having to have insurance before you bid, pre-qualification questionnaire, the requirement for audited accounts. I think those things will make an extraordinary difference. I think combining with that the efforts government is making to make sure that government departments not only have targets for procurement, but that we report on them and we are held accountable for them as well. I think in addition to that, I think we have to make sure that when you're a large business, there is a feeling that procurement is something you do. You have a particular department which is responsible for it. There's a sense, as the Secretary of State said to you a few days ago, that actually it's the big winners in the procurement system. They're almost setting the terms of the debate. We need to ensure that through things like digitisation, more of the procurement process is sort of pre-populated for small companies, with the Cabinet Office working on better education for small companies to make sure that they know how to pursue the opportunities of procurement. So there's structural things going on, but we need to give advice and support to small businesses so that they feel that something which has been closed to them in the past feels like it's something more accessible to them.
Okay, and can I just follow up on the departmental sort of targets and spend on small business procurement? How will you, as a department, hold other departments to account if they're not meeting those targets?
Well, we have, as well as the 3-year target for spend by departments and non-departmental public bodies, they also have to, alongside that, set out the SME action plans for how they're going to make it easier for them as well. I view my job as small business manager to be constantly being an advocate across government for this, so I will be talking to colleagues and working with colleagues on that. I know you as a committee will be breathing down the neck of government rightly on this as well. The other thing I'd say on procurement is, the job isn't done on that. We're also consulting at the moment, as you know, on going further than the Procurement Act in terms of responsibilities for the wider public sector as well.
Okay, just to follow up on that, I'm sure you will be assiduous in sort of pursuing this on behalf of small businesses, but if you get a department that's, not really reaching the standards and comes up with lots of perfectly, on the face of it, legitimate reasons why they haven't quite met the expectations, what levers do you have at your disposal? What influence can you use to sort of address that?
Well, I take the example of colleagues in defence at the moment. So a department which historically, largest buyer in government, but often with a relationship with very large customers rather than small business. There where there is a particular historic issue with that, you see us working with them on their small business procurement centre that they have. You see them doing things like reserving a certain amount of spend to focus towards SMEs within their procurement. So I think it's recognising where there are particular issues within the system. We have to investigate why that is. What is it about the world that those particular government departments are working in that makes it more challenging for SMEs?
It sounds like teaching them the error of their ways. rather than anything?
No, I don't think so. And I think this is work that's led by the MOD themselves. I think there is a genuine desire to get better at this, running all the way across government. The other thing I'd say to you is, I mean, if you read the National Procurement Policy statement as well, running through that, like writing in a stick of rock, all the way through it as small businesses, it's there, you know, at the very beginning, running all the way through. This is an absolute focus right across government at the moment.
Yeah, I think defence is a really good example, because I imagine that's going to be one of the most challenging ones. I think really what I'm trying to get to is, you know, what is it that you can do? You know, what levers do you have? What power do you have to force them to deliver on the standards that we're setting?
Well, as I said, I mean, partly this is about the publishing of the targets and the reporting on them every year, and so there's an element of transparency here. But again, as with the defence example, it's being collaborative and working with them on this, and trying to change the understanding of procurement and what value for money looks like in procurement, away from just the pound number that's in a column and into that wider benefit that you get, the wider social benefit that you get from procuring more and spending more with small and medium enterprises.
Thank you. Can I just check, is the target 33% of government procurement to go to SMEs or 20%?
So we are asking government departments to set their targets.
Right.
Yeah.
And the aspiration is?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Thank you. Mr. Aldrich.
Thank you, Minister. So small businesses in Western-super-Mare and Wirral are telling me they're struggling to maintain their reserve operating costs. They're trying to balance the need to save with the need to invest. It's really harming growth in places like Western-super-Mare. They don't know where to invest or how to invest, or even if they've got the capital to invest. One of the big things that's causing problems is late payments. We know that that you're not planning to introduce late payments legislation until 2026. Is the voluntary code and the reporting requirements enough?
No, it's not, which is why we are consulting on this at the moment. I mean, as the Chair said, I mean, the enormous cost to the economy on late payments of about £11 billion is only part of the story. I mean, 133 million hours of staff time spent chasing late payments. And I know I mentioned sort of this job being cathartic at times. I mean, I think back to roughly this time of year a few years ago when I was owed tens of thousands of pounds from a supplier. And with them, I don't think that was a deliberate strategy to try and keep their cash flow going. I think it was just the indifference of a large institution. But it was an excruciting
Name and shame
experience.
them.
What's
Minister,
that?
You should name and shame them, Minister.
Well, I will. I'll not abuse my my position. But I think the thing I would say in terms of the code, we've obviously replaced the prompt payment code with the fair payment code, and that's more than just a sort of name change. The new code has to have to get the kind of gold standard or the silver standard or the bronze standard of payment practices. You have to give more evidence than you did before. Unlike before, you have to reapply for it. So there is more of a sense of it being I think a more credible test of your payment practices.
I mean, in the past month, we've seen in the Financial Times concern about late payment legislation being watered down. I just wondered if you could comment on that.
So I saw that story too, and sometimes when you see stories in the press, you can work out what the sort of provenance of them was, and that one I simply couldn't. There is a real determination in government, I think evidenced by the fact that the Prime Minister was there for the launch and was so enthusiastic around the proposals that we have with late payments. And aside from all the sort of detail of the legislation when we bring it through, the aim is to try to change that power relationship between small companies and big suppliers.
Okay.
And that won't be done if there are sort of loopholes within it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, in the last decade, 83 million phone calls to HMRC have gone unanswered. Yep. Is that acceptable?
No, it's not. I have been the small business person on the phone, and it's incredibly frustrating when you just simply do not have enough time in the day to run your business at the best of times. I mean, the FSB reckons that small businesses spend about 44 hours and £4,500 on dealing with HMRC a year. What I would say is, if you look now, we're at 84% of calls to HMRC being answered.
That's still millions of phone calls going unanswered. So last year, for example, it was over 6 million went unanswered.
That is still shy of the 85% target, but when you consider that we inherited 66% of those calls being answered, it does show progress.
Well, the numbers from the House of Commons Library don't quite show those exact same percentages that you've shown. So 23-24, 77% of phone calls were answered. 23-24, 24-25, it was 80%. So those numbers don't quite add up properly. But an 85% target is still going to mean 3 or 4 million calls a year not being picked up. Are you comfortable with 3 or 4 million people phoning HMRC each year and never getting a response?
Of course not. And
so will you change the target?
That's what. Well, these would be a matter for Treasury ministers. But what I would say is there's £500 million being put into HMRC at the moment to improve that. A huge and important part of that will be moving from about 3/4 of interactions with HMRC happening in the sort of digital space at the moment to getting to 90% in the future. And that is happening at a pace. So in the last quarter, for example, there were 650,000 new sign-ups to the HMRC app. So we're seeing, I think, a pretty rapid move to a more efficient, quicker, accessible service from HMRC.
There are obviously millions of people across the country, small businesses and individuals, that will never be able to use an HMRC app. And HMRC themselves have said that as an organisation they're quick to investigate wrongdoing, but they're difficult to contact for advice, and that undermines trust and confidence. That's in the HMRC Transformation Roadmap 2025. Yep. So having an app is all well and good, but if between 3 and 4 million people at your target cannot get through when they pick up the phone, you're undermining trust and confidence, aren't you?
Yeah, and I would say I think the vast majority of small businesses are desperately keen to pay what they owe, and it is at times far too difficult for them to do that. It's also bad news for government, because about 60% of the tax gap is
in
small
that case,
businesses.
If the majority of small businesses are keen to pay what they owe, and it's difficult for them to do that with the target that you have got as 85%, are you going to change that target? So as a government, you are not accepting 3 or 4 million calls going unanswered each year as the government's aim and ambition?
Well, as I say, and it's a sort of inevitable thing slightly of being a minister responsible for small business, but having to work with lots of other departments. The matter of targets that are set will be for Treasury ministers. But again, just to say, there is an extraordinary amount of investment going in to try to deal with the issues you raise.
Let's put the question a different way. Do you think it'd be a great idea for you and the Exchequer Secretary to agree a pathway to getting closer to 100%? Would that be a good idea?
Of course, I think it's okay. Target should also be always be a floor rather than a ceiling in terms of your ambitions.
Yeah. Mr. Reynolds, anything further on that? No. Dan Aldridge.
So we are blessed in this country to be an island nation. So lots of coastal communities all over the place. I represent Western-super-Mare, so hospitality and tourism industry is huge for us. But we know that they're struggling, and lots of the small businesses that speak to me talk about the VAT system inhibiting their ability to grow. Do you accept this, and have you discussed this with the Treasury?
So I think the issue around VAT is one that's often discussed, and the idea that there are companies sort of foregoing growth before that £90,000 threshold. I'd say a couple of things on that. I think first of all, I mean the £90,000 threshold. And again, I'm slightly treading on Treasury Minister's toes here. The £90,000 threshold is among the highest, if not the highest, in the OECD. Treasury analysis suggests that bunching effect, where people are just below the threshold, they reckon that at most accounts for about 0.5% of all the companies who are not registered for VAT. And the final thing I'd say on it is there is a variety of views on this from small businesses. You have some people arguing for the threshold to be higher. You have others arguing for it to be lower, for example, within the beauty sector, because they have a suspicion that people are using chair system to avoid VAT. So I would, again, it's a matter for Treasury Ministers, but there isn't a clear consensus amongst business on this.
The other problem that is put to us is that if you're operating a business with what is in effect disguised self-employment, that is radically undercutting a business that is employing everybody.
Yes.
Because the disguised self-employment business is well under the VAT threshold and therefore has such a great competitive advantage that it is putting the good guys out of business. So how are you going to fix that?
Well, it would be a matter for Treasury to do, but as I said,
what's your advice to Treasury about how to fix that?
So I think anything that Treasury does on VAT has the potential to be extraordinarily costly. It raises about £180 billion a year.
But a different approach would be to drop the VAT threshold really low so that actually you could have a level playing field.
Absolutely, but then you're into a situation where you are potentially raising taxes on lots of other businesses who are not
we could have a tapered
who are not
system.
performing the kind of avoidance. But I think if you have the and again, it's a matter for Treasury, but if you have tapering, that adds to the complexity as well. So I understand. My advice to Treasury would obviously be behind closed doors, but it would be about making sure that, in seeking to deal with particular issues, we're not creating other problems.
So, I mean, just for the purposes of our inquiry, is this something on which you are going to discuss with Treasury options for reform, or is this basically just in the too difficult bucket?
I don't think this is a live conversation at the moment. Yeah.
Mr. Madders?
Yeah, just to follow up on the sort of bogus self-employment issue, and it's a far wider problem than VAT registration, as we know. We've had evidence from the hair and beauty sector in particular, but there are lots of other sectors where this is becoming more of an issue, and it is about creating a level playing field. What is your assessment of the scale of the problem?
I think it is. I think it's a significant problem. I've heard from beauticians in my own area where they feel they're a good employer, give their staff in their salon all the benefits and security of income that you would expect, but feel that they are being undermined by people who are not doing that. So I think it's a significant issue. There's obviously a wider conversation going on in government about employment status, which would be for Minister Dearden. But yeah.
I think we probably have the same conversations, because certainly hair and beauty salons in my constituency talk about this as unfair competition, but they also say this is actually affecting our ability to recruit the stylists of the future, because we're just not going to be able to hire people on apprenticeships like we used to. Is there anything that the department can do in respect of that?
It's certainly something we can take away and look into.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go to Alison Griffiths and the
Thank you, Chair.
business rates.
Indeed. And what I would also like to say is that, at a time when businesses are actually complaining that this government is adding more and more cost and regulation, including the Employment Rights Bill, it's actually really disappointing to hear that reducing those costs isn't part of your top three. But when we add on to that the plans for business rates reform, which have so disappointed small businesses, community groups, and larger firms, do you not think it's time for a rethink?
Well, I think reducing regulation was one of my regulatory costs, was one of my top three.
It was, but you're about to bring in the Employment Rights Bill, so how does that square with reducing regulation?
Well, we are going to be doing that in a way which, through consultation, we try and do it in a way which minimises that regulatory cost, while, and we spoke about at the beginning the challenges that small businesses face. One of the challenges small businesses face is that customers don't have enough money in their pockets as well. And I don't think we can separate out people's security of income from the money that ends up, the money that's in people's pockets from the money that ends up in the tills of businesses. But on...
you do need to have a job to have security of income. But I hear my chair, and I know the question he really wants me to focus in on here is about business rates and whether it is time for a rethink by this government on your approach to business rates and reform.
I feel slightly like when I'm talking to my children on the day before Christmas and telling them they'll have to wait. Obviously, the budget will come tomorrow, and there will be announcements on business rates within that, especially with regards to the permanently lower rate on
what will they say?
Retail and hospitality. We'll have to find out.
You're the only person who doesn't know.
What's that, sorry?
You didn't read the FT this morning.
But I think, the Treasury have said, as well as setting those rates, they'll also be talking about the wider reforms that were within their consultation paper as well. So things like, looking at slab and slice or improving small business rates. So there is.
Slab and slice could. For the benefit of everyone watching this, what do you mean by that?
So slab and slice, where instead of having a sort of marginal banded rate, that it's just in one block. These are issues, as the Treasury have said, they are going to continue to work on. So I wouldn't take the fact that business rate reform is being done in stages as being a sort of end of the story.
Okay. Wait and see. Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, economic output from British hospitality in 2023 was about £62.6 billion, just shy of 3% of UK economic output. But hospitality employs 7% of all UK jobs. Food and beverage inflation is still high. There are 22.7% fewer independent restaurants today than there were pre-pandemic. In the budget, hospitality had to contend with the NI increase and the cut in retail hospitality and leisure relief. And on the floor of the House, literally in the last 45 minutes, the minister's just announced that mayors will be able to raise new tourist taxes. That's been announced in the last 45 minutes. Can you understand why hospitality thinks the government hate them?
This time tomorrow we will all either be in the chamber or having just left the chamber, where we will be talking about permanently lower business rates for retail and hospitality.
But that's if they've been able to survive the last year, where their rate relief went from 75% down to 40%. But Hospitality UK have said that the measures in last year's budget added £3.4 billion to the cost of the hospitality sector, and 53% of all jobs that have been lost since the budget have been lost in hospitality. A cafe owner sat where you're sat now not long ago, saying they had to sell an additional 400 croissants a year to stay in the same place. Just stay in the same place, and that was never going to happen. And they cannot pass these costs onto consumers anymore. So how are you going to fix the damage that's been done to hospitality in last year's budget?
Well, it's not just about those lower business rates for retail and hospitality, the cutting of regulatory administrative costs is significant for those businesses.
Like what?
As well. Well, Secretary of State, I saw the committee the other day gave the example of the £250 million we cut in the last few weeks from the costs of directors' reports for hundreds of thousands of small businesses. The example he gave was of coffee shops having to do directors' reports. So, it isn't just about business rates relief. It's also about access to finance. It's about skills.
Access to finance, it might be one thing, but when you're selling a pint of beer and the pub is only making a few pence off a £6 or £7 pint in London, great, I don't have to do a report anymore, a director's report. I'm not making any money. Great, I might have access to finance. I don't want access to finance. I'm not growing, because why would a hospitality business grow at the moment when we're seeing in 2025 hospitality is growing by half of what it did in 2024?
Because it's not only about those measures, it's also about putting more money into consumers' pockets as well. I have a frustration at times that those two debates take place slightly separately from each other. The only conversation about what we're doing on insecure work and increasing people's wages and standard of living, and the business conversation is spoken about in terms of the cost of it, not in terms of the opportunity, not in terms of the fact that part of the reason hospitality and high streets in recent years have been in such crisis is because people have insecure work, people have low pay, they don't have money in their pockets and aren't able to go out and spend in their communities, in their cafes, in their cinemas, in their restaurants. We are not going to turn that around off the back of lower pay and insecure work.
Hospitality is also in crisis, you'd agree, because we're paying the most expensive energy bills in Europe, and businesses are having to front that cost because the cost of employing people has been put up massively in the last budget, and people don't want to go out spending their money, and that is hitting hospitality immensely. So do you understand, though, why hospitality don't have confidence in the government? Can you understand it? Can you look at these pub owners and understand why they're angry?
We understand absolutely that things are incredibly tough for lots of small businesses, but again, hospitality workers deserve security of income as well. We cannot separate out issues of standard of living, of people's security of income from the wider health of the economy. Part of the reason hospitality, high streets, retail have had such a difficult few years is because incomes have been stagnant. We've got to break that logjam.
Okay. Let's move on to a different category of costs. That's in Griffiths.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit, I felt like I was living in a parallel universe listening to that answer, because, as you will realise, that if you haven't got a job, because the costs that you're piling onto hospitality businesses are causing 53% of the job losses that we've seen so far this year, then there won't be more money in consumers' pockets. I think all of us around this room want to see a successful growth economy, but we are mystified at the approach. And on costs, energy costs are a really important part of what we're hearing from every single business, and including high streets and hospitalities. The schemes announced so far on energy costs are going to do very little to help smaller firms. So is there anything that we can expect in terms of programmes being targeted at bringing down the costs for these companies?
Well, I think I would challenge slightly what you say, because the whole drive of the government towards net zero, towards getting off of the volatility of fossil fuels and the higher prices that has left us with, it's about lowering bills for all consumers, including small businesses.
So including the workers in Mossmoran?
Well, the workers in Mossmoran were working very hard to help.
I mean, you've heard from Paul Greenwood, the UK chair of ExxonMobil, that it is energy costs that are driving the destruction of these businesses. So we're talking about high street businesses, we're talking about hospitality, but we're also talking about businesses right at the top of the tree. And if ExxonMobil can't keep a plant going with energy costs at this height, and these energy costs are, as you've already identified, are a political choice.
Well, under the previous government, we had occasional interventions to deal with the problem, but no attempt to deal with the cause.
What is the strategy for bringing energy costs for small businesses down?
Small business.
Now?
So we have, for the larger businesses, we have the BIC scheme, which the Secretary of State spoke about yesterday. Across the piece with smaller businesses, things like the market review that Ofgem is undertaking, which are aimed to help all bill payers, is there. We have, through the UK Climate Hub, a whole suite of advice to help people make energy efficiency gains. There are things like the boiler replacement scheme, which lots of small businesses don't know that they are eligible for. And within the £5 billion Pride in Place funding, there was, amongst the list of pre-approved interventions, one of those was about energy efficiency and measures to cut budgets for businesses. But ultimately, the answer to this, as it is with households, is to fix the long-term underinvestment in the energy market that has left us with unacceptably high energy costs.
I mean, if Sarah Edwards were here, she would also ask you a question about energy brokers and the lack of any plans to regulate energy brokers. Are you going to sort that out?
So again, that would be a matter for my colleagues in DESNES, but I know that is something they intend to regulate. Energy brokers can be helpful to small businesses. They're another part of that sort of professional service landscape that helps you do things which otherwise you wouldn't have the time to do yourself.
Most are not in our experience. And in our evidence.
But many cases where it is leading to an absolute rip-off of businesses when they're already struggling with energy prices. But DESNES intend to do something about that.
Anything further on that, Mr. Griffiths?
Sorry,
Anything further?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to ask as well what the government is planning to do in the meantime to protect businesses from mis-selling and aggressive sales tactics from these brokers.
Well, as I say, DESNES have I think said that they intend to act quite quickly to regulate to regulate those. Well, we have a whole suite of advice for small businesses. It's about helping them make the right sort of choices to lower their energy choices. I mean, for example, in the West Midlands at the moment, we're also piloting our energy advice service, which combines grants for energy efficiency and things which would reduce energy prices along with that advice. So we are taking action as well as doing that bigger structural change and regulatory change.
Just to clarify for the record, the Pride in Place funding that you just referenced, that applies in one single ward in my constituency. So that's not going to apply to the vast majority of businesses in my constituency. I mean,
it's £5 billion across hundreds of communities across the country, so it is sizable, notwithstanding that.
Right. Sorry, Ms. Batch, you want to...
Thank you very much. Yeah. And staying on energy for a moment, the impact of RIIO-3 on non-domestic bills is estimated to be between 5 to 10% from April. And so what representations have you made to Ofgem and DESNES ahead of their decision early next month about how this is going to work?
So again, this would be a matter for colleagues in DESNES. It's the occupational hazard of being small business minister that I do keep referring to other people.
That's okay, we just want to know what your demands are of them, really.
Yeah. Well, we'll be having ongoing discussions on that, but I'll be happy to keep the committee updated on that.
I'm working on the assumption that you don't believe a 5 to 10% increase in non-domestic energy bills from April will be a good idea for our small businesses.
Again, I'm going to be very careful not to stand on my DESNES colleagues' toes, but as with DESNES, as with Treasury, as with all bits of government, we are constantly making the case for small businesses.
Okay. Justin Madders.
Yeah, so we've obviously had quite a lot of evidence from Association of Convenience Stores, British Retail Consortium about the costs that they're facing, particularly in terms of crime prevention and protecting their staff. Is there anything that the department are planning to do to help assist with that?
So I think that I know you've just had the session on the sort of higher end crime. This is obviously something that is primarily led by the Home Office. For our part, I mean, we're working in coordination with them on tackling retail crime. I think in addition to what Home Office are doing in terms of, making the assault of a retail worker a specific crime, removing the sort of £200 get out clause in terms of it being a summary offence for shoplifting. In addition to that side of things, which is about sort of law enforcement, I think it's important to remember this is about, as well as crime incidents themselves, it's about how people feel about their high streets, and if they see their high streets with lots of empty shops or with bogus shops springing up in amongst them, that has as much an effect on people's feeling of insecurity and lack of safety in an area. So I see very much the support we're giving to high streets, and in terms of regeneration as well, working with colleagues at CLG, as all being part of a piece about making high streets places that feel safer, more comfortable, more welcoming.
And can I just follow up on a totally different type of crime, cybercrime? Because obviously we published this economic security report yesterday, which I think highlights the real threats that this means, and obviously the JLR incident is very fresh in people's minds. One of the things that became quite apparent during the response to that was that the smaller businesses, the tier 2 and 3 suppliers, weren't really on the radar of anyone for support. So I think, given that we know that cyber threats are a continuing issue, if another large business is attacked in this way, what have you learned from the JLR experience that means that you will be able to ensure that those smaller businesses, which may well have, a large bulk of their work with the main company, are going to be supported through that time?
Well, obviously, Minister McDougall, my colleague, has been working to make sure that the support goes all the way through the supply chain. On the point on cybersecurity, I met with the Digital Adoption Task Force this morning to talk about this. If you're Jaguar Land Rover or you are Marks and Spencers, a cyber attack can be extraordinarily costly, but if you're a smaller supplier, it can be existential. And we've recently written to small businesses, encouraging them to take up the support that's there, so that they can take advantage of the help and advice we provide on cybersecurity, the free help and advice we provide on that. I think the other thing to say is, whether it's cybersecurity or it is e-accountancy software or e-invoicing, we need to get small businesses into a place where they see engaging on these issues as being a growth opportunity rather than another obligation, something else that's on their to-do list. We know that companies that adopt these digital technologies can have a 22% growth bonus off the back of it. And that's partly from protecting themselves from these challenges, but also from opportunities that they discover.
I think there's some interesting recommendations in the committee's report on this subject, but I just want to take you back to and I think absolutely businesses do need to sort of prepare for direct attacks, but I think it's one of the things that we picked up pretty clearly from the JLR experience was actually the support didn't get through to those further down the supply chain, and as you quite rightly pointed out, they're less able to absorb that kind of risk. So what is it that you can do in terms of departmental support to make sure that in future there's greater mapping and awareness and support for those smaller businesses that might be affected by a big attack on a large organisation.
I think that's a really important point. And I mean, I know you're very aware of the work DBT does in terms of industries in distress. I think there's a strong argument that you're making about sort of preempting that and having a proper mapping of supply chains and vulnerabilities there, which I'm very happy to take away and work with Minister McDougall on.
Thank you very much. Just before I bring in Sonia Kumar, let me just check one thing. So you'll have read, no doubt, the Home Office letter back to us, which arrived at the unseemly time of just before this meeting. But the Home Office says that investment in security measures is not a Home Office lead, and so they can't comment. The challenge that we have here is that if a business invests in security measures, the risk is it then inflates the rateable value of the business, and so actually the business rate bill will then go up. This letter from the Home Office effectively washes their hands of that problem. How will you go about helping solve that problem with the Treasury?
I've not seen that correspondence. I'm very happy to look at that.
Yes, I'm sorry that your colleagues provided it so late. We did ask for it yesterday.
No, sure. I'm very happy to go away and look at that. But I think you make a good point, which is we've got to make sure that investing in these things is something that's seen as being, on the right side of the column.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to do London inquiry. So 20% of businesses in the UK are run by females. There is no mention of women in the SME strategy. Why is that?
I think it's a good point, well made, and perhaps something that we need to review. I think there's maybe sometimes an assumption that women are often better represented at the SME level than at other levels of business. So maybe there was an assumption that it was in the share price. But I know you know, because I sat and listened to your 10-minute rule bill on this subject. Across government, we are working to try to improve the support and the accessibility to advice for women entrepreneurs across the piece.
And quite a lot of women have micro businesses. How are you going to support women actually expanding those? And what support mechanisms are you putting in place to encourage more women to actually open businesses?
Yeah. So there is the £100 million investment in female-led funds through the Invest in Women Committee, who one of the first meetings I had after I was appointed. The British Business Bank is doing a lot of work to make sure that the finance that they underwrite and increase access to is more available to not just women but other people who are underrepresented within the entrepreneurship
Given the unfortunate omission that Sonia Kumar has highlighted, maybe before we wrap up this inquiry, you might feel moved to write back to us, possibly in response to Ms Kumar's bill.
Can I hand over to my official, who I should say I wasn't there during the writing of this, but Isabel was, so she can.
There is a reference to this in the strategy.
Okay.
In the unlocking access to finance.
In the SME strategy for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Which is the reference that the minister just made. It does talk about underrepresented entrepreneurs, of which women is one category, also disabled people, also people from ethnic minorities. So all of those are in that chapter.
You might reflect on just providing a fulsome answer to that point before we wrap up the inquiry. That would be terrific.
Very happy to.
Thank you very much. Let me just bring in Dan Aldrich.
Thank you. Considering the need to develop skilled workers across our country, SMEs now must engage with a number of organisations, so local skills improvement plans, Get Britain working plans, local growth plans, technical excellence colleges, construction skills mission board and clean energy jobs plan. In your view, is it clear where they should go to meet their workforce needs?
No, it isn't always as clear as it should be. Access to skills is consistently rated as one of the top barriers to growth. We are obviously investing an additional 1.2 billion to try to deal with that. We are putting in place all sorts of new, more flexible training products for SMEs. But if you don't know where to go to access that, that's no use. I think you'll find the business growth service, so the new business advice service that we've launched, I think it's so much clearer at signposting people where they should go to address particular skills needs. So you, I don't know if anyone in the committee has spent much time with the new business growth service website, but if you've sort of given up on business support online from government before, which many people would have good reason to have done, I mean, you enter in your business type, your turnover, your location, and you get really tailored signposting. And again, it's all about sort of saving people time and getting them closer to that thing that will make the difference to their growth.
I think it's just a plea from the SMEs that I've spoken to most recently is pare back, bring back some clarity to the system, and then iterate from there. No shiny new things. Just do one thing and do it well and iterate it is what they've told us.
So I mean, Skills England are working hard to try and simplify this. I mean, things like the simplification around V levels and things like that, where instead of having hundreds of different, confusing options, that we try and narrow it down so people can find the assistance they need.
Thank you very much, Chair. SMEs tell me that the process for getting an apprentice in is too slow, too cumbersome, too bureaucratic, and they feel like giving up before they get to the end of it. So what are you going to do with colleagues in the 2 other departments that are now responsible for this?
Yep.
To make sure that it is a reality for SMEs to get apprentices in?
So I'm glad you said that it's responsibility to other departments before I got to it. But I mean, you're absolutely right in terms of the how people reporting that they feel it's a sort of cumbersome process. Some of that, I know that colleagues in those 2 departments, for example, ensuring that there's a sort of single digital place to do that, and that information is pre-populated and all the rest of it, so it becomes a faster process. I also think some of it is acknowledging that not every time is it going to be about an apprenticeship. So the short courses, for example, are incredibly important, giving people other options to find the things that they want. But yeah, as I say, I know colleagues in DWP and DFE are working to try to achieve exactly what you're outlining.
Thank you. Finally, John Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned the business growth service, and the business support picture is quite a thicket of a variety of layers and levels. It's very difficult to navigate. You'd think that new website is very good, it's a one-stop shop, but we picked up on the road shows that not a lot of people know about it. So I wonder what assessment you've made of how successful it's being in terms of people picking it up and actually taking it and running with it. And then what plans, if any, you have to go further? Is there anything else coming down the line? You've got a shiny new website, fantastic. What else? What have you done for us lately?
Yes, so I think it's a point well made, and look, a lot of people will have perfectly understandably have given up in the past when they've been searching for information in the government space, because they end up jumping from website to website and it just feels exhausting. You don't have time, so you let the opportunity go by. On Thursday last week, I was in Newcastle at the first of our roadshows about the business growth service. We were working with local business networks and we're trying through word of mouth to get beyond that reluctance. We also have coming up soon a major marketing campaign on that to encourage people to take advantage of the advice that's there. I should also say I think the business growth service is an extraordinary leap forward in business advice, but it's far from the end of the story as far as we're concerned. We are looking for what else we can put under that umbrella.
Give us a clue what you might be thinking about. Is there any hints at this stage?
So we are we're looking at how to improve the digital offer within it. We are looking at how we can incorporate AI tools into it so that people can find and get more tailored advice more quickly within it. I don't know if Ros or Isabel particularly want to add in terms of future plans for development of the business growth service.
Yeah, there are a number of services that are currently under the purview of other departments that we think we can better connect to. So exports, thinking about other skills. I mean, we know there's more we can do to improve and hone and better join-ups for exactly the reasons that you've described.
So you're looking at some cross-government working then, you're going to move across these silos that we always hear about, yeah?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think you can see that running through it already, where you get signposted on skills, on exports, on tax advice, on all sorts of different things within that. And as Ros was intimating, a lot of the advice that has been elsewhere that has been valuable to people is being built into it as well.
How are you going to mark your homework on this? I mean, are you going to have metrics on how many people are taking this up? Are you getting feedback? How are you going to know that it's a success or not?
So there's certainly the feedback so far has been extraordinarily positive. Again, I'll turn to Ros perhaps for on metrics for the performance.
I think one of the ways it's been launched is to build in a process by which it's continually improved. So there's going to be more business voices to be included, so that there's a panel of people who use it, who can give feedback. So like a commercial company who's building a service, it's got that same approach of iterating. So we knew when it was launched that was the kind of the sort of base level, but it's been continually improved. So obviously we track users, but I think we're kind of more interested in the point you described about the quality of the experience and whether they actually felt that it gave them more confidence to access the services as opposed to simply giving them information. So you can look at the number of users, but that is only one sort of indicator. So I think we're really interested in that depth of understanding the user, and the roadshows are a really good way of doing that, but there are other ways that we're doing to try and sort of build up, because it's such a diverse audience, obviously the SME audience, and they obviously have very different needs. So we have to be conscious of one version might not work for someone else. So it's a continuous iteration.
Okay, I think we're quite interested in that data as well. So perhaps we could have a think about how we exchange and scrutinise that data for you. Great. That brings us to the end of our time. So thank you very much indeed for your evidence today. How will we judge your success in 12 months' time?
So we are. There is what I view personally as success, and then there's what we're measuring. As a department,
we're going to judge your success as the Minister for Small Business.
So first of all, I think on delivery. On those 200 odd commitments within the small business strategy, are we continuing to work at pace to deliver those? I think we're looking at outcomes as well in terms of the impact on small businesses around the country, but also for me it's about confidence. I think there is often with small businesses that I speak to a sense of them waiting for the right moment that may never come, and getting that message across to them that through trade deals the market is there, through procurement the market is there, the support is there in terms of financing, the support is there in terms of exporting, the increased business support and advice is there, and more people having the confidence to take advantage of all of these things, I think is the measure of success for me.
Great. Well, look, that's on the record now. So we look forward to holding you to
6 months'
account
time, you can
for the delivery of those three big deliverables that you've set out for the committee. That concludes our session today. Order.